What's up, Duke fans? Welcome to the Devil's Den podcast. I'm your host, Josh Smith, joined by my co-host Raul and Shu, and got a super special episode today. First off, I want to give a shout out to one of our listeners, subscribers, Stephanie Rich, for emailing us in and kind of giving us this idea. At the time, Stephanie, we thought we might be lucky to maybe get a high school official or someone. Ended up with Jamie Luckie himself here. So Jamie's retired, but most of y'all listening are probably pretty familiar with his work. Was in the ACC for a very long time. Still involved in the game, doing some stuff with officiating now. Jamie, before we kind of get into it, I'll just kind of let you introduce yourself. And again, we really appreciate you coming on here. And so kind of what's life like for you now post officiating?
Yeah, so I came off the floor. So last year was my first year off the floor as an official after a 40-year career. Now, that wasn't a 40-year college career, but a 40-year career, which included 25 straight ACC tournaments, which is something I'm really proud of, and I'm in a pretty good run. So I've seen a lot in the league over the last 25 years. So as I was coming off the floor, Brian Kersey, who's the supervisor of officials for the Atlantic Coast Conference, longtime official like myself and very close friend, we had an idea that to keep me involved. I come from a coaching, teaching family and background, and I've always had a passion for giving back to officiating and teaching our next up and coming group and even the next up and coming group. So Brian approached me about a position of the director of training and development for our alliance, which includes 11 conferences, the ACC and the Big East being at the top. So basically last year for me was, I never really watched a lot of games when I was refereeing, because you kind of get to the point where it's too much. You have to kind of reset. And I'm a huge hockey fan, by the way, so I just watch hockey during basketball season. But came to me with the idea of keeping involved, doing education, doing training. So last year I would watch just a ton of games like Brian did, and all times. And then I put out 132 voiceover plays that are about 3 minutes long. So any plays that come up in games that other officials need to see that weren't in that game, we're able to get out to them right away. So my job last year was just identifying those areas where we needed to improve on, and then following up with video reinforcement of those and getting them to everybody in our alliance, obviously including the ACC. And then I was also asked to actually, the late Ramey Steins and I, Ramey suddenly passed away about a year ago. We picked up all the JUCO schools to assign and take care of all their officials. So I did that last year. And now this year I also added a Division III league that I will be assigning and training all the referees for that. So not only do we have, the ACC, the Big East, the Atlantic 10 and other Division I leagues, but in our alliance, we have the JUCO Region 10, which is North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia. We have now USA Division III, USA South, and we have the Carolinas Conference. So it allows officials to get into entry-level positions with us at the lower leagues and work their way up to the top league if that's what they aspire to, and obviously if they have the talent to do that. So I was plenty busy last year. I will honestly say the only thing I missed probably was the 2 hours of the game. The rest of the stuff that went with that, the travel and all the stuff that the guys had to deal with now going out west, of course. I was not. I was glad I didn't have to do that, and at this point in my life was able to kind of transition into something that kept me involved with the game and keeps me my hands close to it and able to give back a lot of the stuff that I was given.
Jamie, you mentioned the lower level guy. Is that kind of the career path to how you get to become an ACC level ref? You start, I didn't know if it starts middle school, high school, or can you jump right into JUCO and some of these D3 schools?
Yeah, so the entry level paths are different. It depends. Some of the guys come from high school, but a lot of what you see now is young people that want to aspire to be top level Division I officials. They'll get involved at the intramural level at their colleges. That's a big thing, and we get a lot of referees from there. And then but yes, the path is especially with us now, get into JUCO, get into D3, get into D2, which is hard to do as well. And then hopefully move your way up to like the Big South, and then maybe to the Coastal, and then maybe to the Atlantic 10, and all the way up to the top leagues via your performance during the season. And also, what you do in the summertime with all our training that we offer throughout the summer, and the camps and clinics that we do to identify and train referees.
So if somebody's looking for their first, their entry-level job kind of refereeing, like what would be some steps they would take?
So, yeah, I mean, they could either sign up for intramurals if they're a college student, obviously, or Shu just said, join a high school board. We offer a couple of really entry-level training sessions. Jerry Heater and I have done one at UNC Charlotte for 20 plus years, that we've started people there as young as 16 years old, that they were interested in refereeing basketball. But a lot of young people come to those really entry-level training things that we have in the summer to just get out on the floor, blow a whistle, get used to what mechanics and things like that. Everybody thinks they can do it until they get out on the floor. And then
basketball officiating stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Then it becomes a lot different. When you're sitting in your living room, it's really easy. When you get out on the floor, and even if you played, we have one of our young up and coming referees, Justin Mackey, who played in the Final Four for South Carolina. He's a guy that we've taken in the last few years, and he's progressing well through the lower ranks. But I get calls from him all the time and saying, so much different than playing, and there's so much involved in it. It's so, it's so sophisticated. And all those things that people don't think about when you sit on your couch and say, oh, they missed that call, or they, whatever. It's a lot. There's a lot that goes into it for sure.
Well, you have to be in shape too, right?
Yeah. And you got to be in shape. Yeah.
Run up and down the floor for 2 hours.
The kids are 18 to 25 now, I guess. And the referees get a year older every year.
Is high school 2-man? I know when I did intramural refereeing at App, we did 3-man crews, but high school, do they do 2-man?
Pretty much it's all 3-man.
It's all 3-man. Okay.
High school, at least in North Carolina it is.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm going to switch gears just a little bit here, fellas. Yep. One thing that I'm curious of, and we're kind of bouncing around the outline, guys. The idea of like different games and different environments are sometimes officiated differently. Like, is that something that like the team of officials kind of decide on, like, fellas, what's our baseline for physicality today? Or how does that work? Is that communicated, or is it more just like within the flow of the game, how the teams are playing, or is that like an intentional kind of game plan coming in? So,
and that varies obviously from game to game and place to place, I guess I would say. But we always talked about, and I know the officials still talk about this today, is that the more talent you have on a floor, the more patient you can be with whistles, the more you can try to let players play through marginal stuff. That is talked about a lot. When you get into situations where, some of the lower divisions, or where the players aren't as talented, where they can't play through things, you might have more whistles in games like that. But the environment certainly comes into play, but for the really big time guys, that's not an issue, because they do it almost every night. But there's certain things that points of emphasis every year, especially in college basketball, that have to be called, or that the powers that be want called. But you have to blend it as it's part art and part robot, I guess it is. That's a foul. That's not a foul. That's a foul. So there's some artistry involved in it. I've always said that the really top officials, and if you look at the guys in our league, like now Ron Groover, Roger Ayers, Bert Smith, Lee Cassell, just to name a few, they have a combination of understanding the rulistic piece of the game, but also understanding there's a art form to officiating, and you have to be able to let things go, or pass on something, or just different things like that. So it's a combination of all those things, really.
Since there is a degree of subjectivity, how is like an up and coming ref evaluated? Who is making that evaluation and kind of on what criteria?
So yeah, so that is an interesting question, because one of the things we talk about at camp or in our clinics in the summer is, if you show up and nobody knows you, the only thing that I have to go by is, how do you look? Like, so how do you present yourself to me? Are you in shape? Do you look like an athlete? Which we talk about a lot, is being athletic and being athletes, not just standing out there with a shirt on, raising your hand and blowing the whistle. But really, to be evaluated at those levels, it's your play calling. It is right or wrong. Like it is, did you get that play right, or did you get it wrong? And then comes the game within the game, I call it, the managing piece of, well, that was possibly a hand check, and it goes to the other end, and you have another possible hand check. You don't want to put air in the whistle called on one end and don't call it on the other, because that gets us to the point which drive coaches crazy, and that's the inconsistency. So there's that game within the game piece, that a great block shot at one end with a little bit of contact and go to the other end. And if something that's a great block shot with a little bit of contact, well, it better be the same, whether it's a foul on one end, or foul on the other, or whether it's not a foul on one end, not on the other. So, but the initial evaluation is, how do you look? Can you run a game? And do you get your plays right?
So is there like a board of people who's combing back through these thousands of hours of tape, kind of trying to decide what was right and what was wrong? I mean, I know in the NBA, they have that last 2-minute report.
Right.
So obviously they're doing it.
Yeah. Every Atlantic Coast Conference League game is evaluated by, would be a former college official, a group of former college officials, a select group, or there's also a few NBA guys in there that do some of our evaluation. Joe Forte, which was a long time ACC official and NBA official, is one of those guys that was in the NBA that does some of our games. So there's a group of about 8 or 10 that actually evaluate every whistle in every ACC conference game, and that comes down to correct call, no call, incorrect, or incorrect call. And then it depends on the play and the call, and how they critique it and explain it. But yeah, so at the end of the season, again, I'll use again one of our top guys. You can take a guy like Ron Groover, and he'll have a percentage based on those evaluations. Like, he's probably 93, 94% when you factor in everything, which is really, really high when you think about it. We were asked to be perfect, and we're not, but our top referees are in that 93, 94% range after their evaluations, usually every year.
That's a good point. And it makes me think too of the idea of, you probably don't like it, but like for fans, right? We use the term like makeup call, things of that nature. Does that play a role? Or like, let's say there was a big play and you go look and it's like, okay, we missed that, right? Or you get a lot of feedback and then it's like, okay, do we make that up somewhere? Or is it just like we have to find a way to compartmentalize it, accept that was the wrong, and we got to move forward and keep it moving? Or is the makeup call real, I guess? Does that ever come into play?
Well, we don't. We always say there's no such thing as a makeup call. I'll tell you that right now. But again, it goes back to that artistry piece, and that is, how do you manage a game to make it fair to everybody? So, like I just said, a block shot with some contact on one end that maybe looked like a foul. We go to the other end, that better be exactly the same. So it's not making things up, but sometimes I will tell you that the great officials will no call something for the good of the game. So because it was a no call on one end, and then we come down and we have the same thing on the other end, it better be a no call, because coaches expect that, and they want that consistency. And game to game, like you said, the earlier question, it varies. I can tell you in the Carolina Duke K's last game, it was myself, Roger Ayers, and now the late Ramey Steins. Our pregame in that game was nobody fouls out of this game. That was the pregame. So, does that affect the game? Well, I don't know, but we realized the moment was, okay, everybody wants to see these two teams play it out, fight it out, and the best team win. And we don't want any of the best players on the bench. And how you get there is really tricky. But if you go back and look at that game, no matter what you thought of the result, the best players were in the game for the whole game. Nobody was ever in foul trouble. Now,
Sure.
If you take 3 Division III referees and you ask them to go work that game, you're probably going to have a lot of people in foul trouble in that game, because they're just back to Raul's question. They're just going to try to get the plays right. Well, we're trying to get the plays right, but we're also trying to manage everything that comes with that, which includes, a little bit of the entertainment value, and they're not there. They're not there to see us, and we don't want to be the show. And so if that makes sense.
Nobody wants to watch the third string center, finish the game out,
or 47 free throws in a half or something, right? And that makes sense too, because there's times where and you see it online, right? You see a clip of a run or something, and there's always like, well, that was a travel, or that's a carry, or like that might have been a goaltend. But within the momentum or the flow of like a 10-point spread, or that momentum starts to shift, I would imagine that's happening in real time for you all as well. Of like, maybe he carried on that breakout dunk, but like, you got to let Cooper go. You got to let Coop just go make that play, right? And so I would imagine that's there. What about the crowd? Like, what is the relationship like with the crowd? Is that it feels like a very real, living, breathing kind of dynamic between y'all and the fans? Like, how do you manage that? And then I guess the second part is like, talk to me a little bit about the like court storming and like the pandemonium of dealing with all that.
Yeah. So I think if you talk to the top guys now and the guys that have worked big games over the years, is that we really like it when it's loud. So when you're at Cameron and it's rocking, it's great, because you can't hear that. All you hear is like a buzz. Like there's noise, but there's no noise like in your ear, like you suck and you're the worst I've ever seen, and all this other stuff that referees get all the time that they have to block out. You don't have to block anything out at places like Cameron, because it's just a humming buzz. And especially in a game like that, or when Carolina or any of the big schools go in there, it's just there. It's not distracting, if that makes sense. It's chaotic for everybody else, but to us, it's just part of what you do and how you have to perform. But yes, in college basketball, the environment is living. It is breathing. It does affect emotions and swings in the game and runs and things like that. So you're aware of those things, and obviously you can't get caught up in them. And the good ones don't. The ACC guys don't, even though people want to think they do, but they really don't. But as far as court storming, the question there is just how we react to that, or how we look at it.
Yeah, just kind of like how you manage it. Like if you sense it, like, okay, Duke's playing at Florida State, and it's, Florida State's up 5, there's 17 seconds left, here comes a foul, get ready. Like, is that like do you sense that, or is it just, you just have to let it be?
No, you have to prepare for those things. I was in a couple at Florida State where the floor got stormed twice that one year. I think it was Duke. It might have been in Carolina. It was there one year when Roy sent everybody off early. So we're part of those discussions with game management as it comes, and we're prepared for it. And we'll do, sometimes set procedural things aside to do what's best for the game at that point, whether it's stop the game and let the teams get out, or just different things to make it manageable. But game management, the ACC, which is excellent, and with us and the coaches, those things are always talked about. That's part of what makes college basketball great. So I don't have the answer to it, but it is something that we are very, very involved with when it gets to that point at certain places. And of course, it only happens with certain teams anyway. So for a lot of teams, it doesn't really matter.
Sure. You mentioned kind of the the dynamic with coaches too. And I am a little curious, especially your career, you've seen a lot. Obviously for us growing up watching basketball in the 80s and 90s, there was a much more demonstrative sideline presence, it felt like, or coaches were empowered or thought that they were empowered enough to be a little bit more animated, getting out of the coach's box, swinging the jackets. Obviously Bobby Knight, we know what happened there. But that seemed to have like really dialed down, and like you don't see a whole lot. I mean, Coach Shire has one technical, I think, in 3 years. He got one last year. Is that evolution just been like a natural thing, or is there something that's like communicated up front between the officials and the coaches, like pregame, or what do you make of that kind of like changing in the landscape there?
I think it's become a very much more a professional kind of a atmosphere, and professionalism by coaches, professionalism by officials. And it's not obviously pro basketball, but it seems to be more like the NBA in terms of how professionally and trust me, everything I'm saying can go out the window in one game, anywhere at any time.
Sure.
But you're right. That's a very good observation, because there's much more. I think officials are trained much better to respond. We go through a lot of stuff that has nothing to do with officiating, where we focus on, emotional intelligence things, for example. Any one of those categories you'll see in any business, how to deal with people in hostile situations, manage the chaos, and I think the coaches have gotten better at that too, where it is a much more professional approach that I'm not going to spend the whole game working this one referee for a call or two when I should be busy coaching my team. So I think it just has become very, very much more professional on both sides. And there's a better, I think, understanding of each other's, there's so much stuff on social media that officials watch on what coaches do, what they teach, what they run, the sets they run, offenses, defenses, all that stuff. And I think there's a lot out there on officiating that coaches watch. So I think all that helps to educate both sides that we're in adversarial roles naturally, but we both have jobs to do, and when you approach it professionally, then it seems to be a better result, and it looks better on television and things like that, as you just pointed out, because it isn't like it used to be, for sure.
What kind of communication goes on throughout the game to kind of explain to the players and the coaches like what's being called and what's going to be called going forward?
Sure. So and I'll take a non-ACC kind of a team like Richmond runs a Princeton style triangle offense, where there's a lot of cutting and backdoors and things like that. So a team like that, a coach might say, well, if you let my guards get held when they're trying to make their cuts on the back door, then we can't run our offense.
Right.
Or if you have a point of a set that starts with a high pick and roll, and the screener is always moving, a coach might say, hey, if you continue to let them screen like that, we're going to have a hard time defending that. So those are a couple of the like plays that they might say or point out to plant a seed, but not to gain an advantage, but to just let this is what they see. I mean, Duke with Reddick used to run that baseline screen. They called it so I think it was something 5 for JJ, and he used to run the baseline, come around Sheldon Williams, and if he got held, then he wasn't going to get the 3-point shot in the corner. So Mike might have said, hey, they're holding JJ on the initial cut. Can you watch it? A Tony Bennett, who's now retired, great coach, obviously. If you call a hand check on us on that play, then we're not going to be able to defend when they play with their elbows in instead of their elbows out, which this is an obvious foul, and this is harder to call. So
right.
Virginia would keep their hands here, things like that. Again, very professional things. And then it might come down to them identifying a player, saying, hey, 35 is throwing his elbows in the post. or it could be anything like that. It's not as much as it, like, again, before, where, hey, 3 seconds and travel and all. There really isn't much like that going on. I think the really good teams and the really good coaches, they're not looking for every call, but if they have a point to make, they're going to make sure that you understand, what's going on and what they're seeing and what they're thinking. And then, we take that information and, we can use it, or we could go back at them and say, well, coach, I saw that play and, like, JJ didn't get held or something like that. But
sure,
just depends on the situation.
Is there a good way to bring up that you missed a call? Like, I know when I was coaching, it's like some little peewee leagues, like, I would tell the ref, everyone, hey, you missed out. You just owe me one here sooner than later.
I think all the good ones will eventually admit to, obviously, a coach that they've missed, because it's a good thing to be honest. And you can't say that 5 times a game, though, right? I mean, you might be able to say it once, maybe twice if it's a hard game. But yeah, so when a coach brings something up and you can say, you know what, coach, that wasn't my best, or you're right, I didn't see it that way. I kicked it, or I missed it, or whatever. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to dress it up, or, you saw it this way, I saw it this way, and let's leave it at that. And one of the things we talk to our especially our younger referees about all the time is you're not going to get the last word in with coaches. You're not. So you have to be able to let them have the last shot and just walk away and take it as, okay, let's, we're moving on. So that's one of the things about college basketball officiating might be different than the pros, is the coaches never leave. They're Hall of Fame coaches. They stay. If they don't stay at that school, they go somewhere else. So you have to have the ability to, you got to get your plays right. But in college, you definitely have to have the ability to be able to get along with, on a professional level, with the coaches, or it's really hard to survive if you don't, because college is coach's game, and they just never leave.
So you guys kind of move on, like, say one of the coaches has a couple, 4-letter words for you during a game on Saturday night. Well, you're refereeing them again Tuesday night. Everything's all squashed now?
We're not in history class.
Yep.
It's over. And if you carry that stuff around with you, it makes it really, really difficult to stay focused and, and to be able to do your job, because it's just sitting in your head, and when you should be focusing on something else that's going on in front of you. But we're not real fond of coaches bringing it up, so we don't bring it up.
Sure. That reminds me too, like, what is the escalation required then for, like, a technical? Like, so is it just a hard line, or is it just this repetitive, consistent throughout the game, enough is enough? And then is that the same for players and coaches, or does one get like a little bit of a longer or shorter leash there?
Yeah. So, like all coaches, all referees have different personalities, different temperaments. Especially early in my career, my fuse was very short. I would, talk to coaches, listen to them, but they understood that when I got to the point I heard enough, that was it. And it was probably going to lead to a technical foul. So it depends on the official, and what their tolerance level is. And it's just certain things are automatic. When a coach escalates to the point on a reaction play, or a play that they react on, that, jumping up and down, throwing things, throwing Sharpies, like Coach K did that one year. Things like that, are what, again, are automatic. But then there's a lot of things that there's a lot of gray area in, and you'll see officials, especially the good ones, a lot use their hands as a stop sign, like, and in this kind of motion, not this, because this is very adversarial. Like, you're done, or I quit talking to me, instead of coach, I hear you. That's it. That's enough. You'll see really good officials go like that. And that might be the next one, is a technical foul. Coach, this is your warning. So it depends. Some things are automatic, but a lot of things aren't. And a lot of it depends on the official, obviously, at the time of the game, especially, because one of the things we talk about often is when you get into the last 10 minutes of the game, especially the last 5 minutes, you don't want like a technical foul being the thing that they point to that say, hey, they call the technical foul and that turned the game. Well, if you do that at 18 minutes to go in the second half, there's a lot of time to recover. If you do that at 5 minutes, there might not be time to recover from that. So a coach might get away with a little bit more near the end of the game, especially a very, very close game, than they would, at the beginning or the first half or middle of the game, something like that. It just, officials don't want to bring that all on themselves. They'll take a little bit more, again, for the good of the game.
I didn't check the validity of this, but I was doing a little research when we had you on, and I don't know if you're aware. I believe you were the only person to ever give Tony Bennett a technical. Do you remember that?
Yes, but that changed in Tony's last year when he received the second technical from Mark Schnurr, who happens to be from Charlotte and lives in South Park as well.
Okay.
And so, but up until that point, Tony's first year playing Maryland, which was the rival game at the end of the year. Duke played Carolina, Virginia played Maryland. It was that last Sunday or Saturday every year. And Tony had a really tough play that went against them in a 2-point game. Gary was at Maryland. And he ran on the floor, threw his jacket. The coaches Sanchez and Jason were trying to hold him back, and they couldn't. But it was one of those situations where I ended up teeing up the nicest guy in college basketball, right? And so that didn't go over too well with the Virginia fans. But Tony and I were always okay even after that, just because it was heat of the moment. That was a situation where we actually talked about it maybe in the summertime when I saw him at a camp or something, and was able to say, hey, I know, Tony, that wasn't personal. You reacted. I was just doing my job, and we kind of hashed it out, and that was it. And obviously I refereed a lot of his games after that, and class act, obviously. But yeah, I do remember that. And I know for years the Virginia fans, that was their battle cry when I came to work games, and I was the only one to ever tee up Tony Bennett.
So how much has social media changed the dynamic? Because obviously in the past you wouldn't have to deal with, fans getting online and having this huge platform to complain about calls and all that. It's just whatever happened in the stadium just kind of ended when they left the stadium, right? So do refs see that stuff on social media, and are they advised to stay off social media, or is that kind of to their own discretion?
Yeah, no. So in the contracts, the independent contractor contracts, it talks about no social media like Facebook, Instagram, whatever any of the stuff out there that the really good referees don't stay on it anyway. It would drive you crazy, obviously. If and my kids say to me, you Google Dad, and he comes up, and you wouldn't believe the things it says. Most we're not really allowed on it. I mean, obviously sometimes it's hard to hide from it now, just because there's so much, and then some of it's cruel, but that's it's the nature of the business. It's what nobody making anybody be a college basketball official at the top level. You chose to do it. You have some ability. You got there, so it kind of comes with the territory, But there's also some really funny stuff on there too. Like I know that, during my career, I'd get things from my brother or my sister or one of my kids saying, "Did you see what they said?" Da, 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 da. And it's kind of entertaining and funny, and you chuckle and you move on. But if you're going to be a top referee and sit there and Google yourself, your brain is going to be fried by the time you step on the floor, and you're not going to know what to do, because you guys know, there's so much out there, and there's not much of what we're doing right now. I think there should be more. I think it would be good, because to humanize officiating a little bit, instead of, and it used to be worse when we only had 9 schools, because everybody knew the ACC referees. They all knew who was coming. Now it's a little different, because staff is bigger, and you got the schools out. You got the schools out in California and Texas, and I don't think the ACC staff is as well known as it used to be. We go back to Lenny Wirtz and Larry Rose, and then you go to our group with Mike Eads, Jamie Luckie, Roger Ayers. You're still working I don't think it's like it used to be where everybody knew. Like you couldn't even go to the Angus barn after a game without somebody in Raleigh, somebody bumping into you and saying, "Hey, where are you going?" Or "I just saw you here or there," stuff like that. So I think it's a little different now, but social media certainly doesn't make it any easier. But I will say that most of the guys don't mess with it, stay off it, don't pay attention to it, because again, it would drive you nuts.
Quit looking for Teddy V's burner account on Twitter then.
Yeah.
Yeah, I quit looking for them all because again, if you want to stay in the game a long time, which Teddy has and a lot of others, you kind of stay away from that stuff.
Yeah, it seems like reffing is just a really thankless job in a way. You're getting heat from the coaches, you're getting heat from the players, you're getting heat from the fans. So is there kind of like a certain personality type that you have to really succeed?
Well, I think it's very important that you have played something in your life at a pretty competitive level. And that pretty competitive level could be high school, like high school basketball or high school, football, but you've been an athlete and you've competed in something. It doesn't necessarily have to just be basketball, but I think, to me, and because I always tell our people in the summertime, our clinics and our camps and stuff, that you are an athlete. As an official, you are an athlete and you're competing in an athletic competition. And what the competition is a 3-person team trying to get as many plays right as they can and manage that game and get to the point where the team that makes the less mistakes and should win the game wins the game. I mean, that's our job. That's our job. Now, is there times in my career that I left the floor and thinking the wrong team won the game? Yeah. And I can tell you, as an athlete and as a competitor, that's not a really good feeling to have carrying around for a day or two. But it happens for whatever reason, whether it was a bad call or we missed a rule or anything. But we are athletes first and foremost. And again, I think people don't look at us like that. And I think they should, because that's the way we look at it. And then our job is competing to get, as many plays right as we can.
So how long is the rule book, and do you have it all memorized?
I don't have it all memorized. I've always been considered one of the good rules guys. I can tell you that when the Hansborough game took place, when he got hit in the face by Gerald Henderson, Carl Hess was the lead official in that game, but I had the rule in my head about why he should be ejected for and call it a fight, because of that was by rule. That's what he did at that point. He didn't mean to do it, but he did it. So that kind of helped me early on in my career, being a rules guy, because I knew it. But it's there's basically 11 rules. There used to be 10, but they had to add 11 because of instant replay, which is everybody's favorite. We can talk about that. That's changing a little bit this year too. But I actually get with the young guys and mentor them. And one of the things I tell them is you have to get in the rule book and you have to know it. And again, that sounds cliche, but it's complicated. There's so many things, but it needs to be a little easier to understand. But it's 11. It's long. I can put it that way. It's long.
You mentioned some changes coming up, and that was kind of wanting to be my last big talking point today and I don't know how much you can kind of say or how much you can get into, so I'll let you do that. But I am curious of, Coach Shire, and there's other coaches too, have talked about kind of the standardization of the game, maybe moving to quarters, adding an extra foul. The shot clock has always been kind of a discussion here. Do you see that kind of happening? And maybe if you can't get into that, what would be the impact for the college game maybe going there? Or do you think that it will always kind of maintain its uniqueness in that way?
I personally think we're headed to quarters. I know they say that we're the only kind of basketball played anywhere in the world that's 20 minutes. But I think the push is towards quarters, and I think it's coming. And one of the big reasons I would be in favor of it is that the fouls would reset after the first quarter. So if you get into a game that hand-to-hand combat game, or we might call it a double helmet game, that you need 2 helmets, not one, you could be shooting 1-1 after 5 minutes are gone in the first half. And then it becomes a free throw shooting contest. With quarters, then it would reset after the first quarter, and you shoot on the 5th in the first quarter, and then you're back to 0 in the second. There's some people that are the purists of college basketball that don't want that change, but I think that change is coming. The 6 fouls, I'm not sure that we'll ever get there with that one. And I don't know that we need to now, the way the game is. I mean, the game used to be played inside out, as everybody knows. It was everybody had a post player, but now the game is played. I've been saying for 10, 12, 15 years, Steph Curry, I love him, but I think he's ruined the game forever, because now we're stuck with 3-point shot after 3-point shot. So there's not that many post players that get in a lot of foul trouble anymore, because there's really not that much post play. And I think the 6 foul would protect big men more than it would protect perimeter players, because they would be more likely to be in foul trouble. So I'm not sure if that's coming. The instant replay is changing a little bit this year, which coaches are going to have a challenge, but they're not going to be allowed to challenge fouls, at least in the first year. They're going to be allowed to challenge out of bounds, goaltending, basket interference, and restricted area plays. So what the positive change it's going to have is, if you notice the last few years, it's been a parade to the monitor at the end of the game for every out of bounds play. Well, now you can't. The referee does not have the latitude to do that. It's going to have to be challenged by a coach, and you get 1 challenge per game. If you're correct, you retain it. But also, if you don't have any timeouts, you can't use it. You have to have a timeout to use a challenge. And if you don't, you can't challenge. So it's going to be a big change, especially at the end of the games. It's going to put a lot more pressure on the referees to get out of bounds plays right. And I can tell you that, people talk about block charge being the hardest call in basketball. Out of bounds plays are the hardest calls in college basketball, because they happen so often and they're so fast, and a tick or a double tick off a finger, and those things are so hard to see. And so that's one big change you're going to have this year. And then they're putting in more of an emphasis on continuous motion, that they want to reward players going to the basket, and you're going to be able to take a step after you get fouled. It's not going to be like the NBA where you get a gather and you get 2 steps. But in college basketball this year, if you get fouled, you're going to be allowed to take 1 step and then finish, or you'll get 2 shots. And I think that'll be a really positive change for scoring, especially at the basket. So those are the 2 big changes.
What about AI? Like, is that that's the big thing now, right? Like, everything's AI. Like, and so is that involved with y'all? And also, is there some sort of like human protection that y'all also are incorporating to say, like, hey, how do we retain agency? How do we use this stuff? Or is it just kind of completely separate?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that we've really, obviously we talk about AI a lot, especially with the younger officials, and we're using some of the plod stuff to get information out to some of our officials now, because they're, we can do a recording like this and summarize it and plot it out to every referee, where they can watch, or they can read and stuff like that. But as far as what they're doing, how they're doing baseball with all the stuff, I don't see how that's going to come in. I'm sure it can. I don't see how it's going to come into basketball. I always thought about, what about if you had a chip in the ball and it lit up when it went out of bounds and things like that, and or who hit it? And I don't know. Things will probably come that we're not thinking about, but we'll use AI with our emails and motivating people and things like that. But as far as in our game, I just don't know. I don't really know where it's going yet.
Yeah, that's one thing I was going to bring up with the out of bounds calls. If you watch tennis, they have a way to kind of instantaneously tell whether the ball was in or out, right? So I wonder if something like that could eventually be implemented in college basketball. Or
I would say that would be an area that it something could be, because now they don't even have the U.S. Open starting. They don't even have the umpires. It will just be the main umpire in the chair, and everything else is done by the eye in the sky. So who knows what's coming? I mean, but as far as officiating or replacing a referee like they're doing in minor leagues with baseball, I don't know how you would do that in basketball. Basketball is you're so much a part of the game, right?
Yeah.
And basketball and hockey and soccer. I mean, you're so much like a part of what's going on, like on the court. You're on there all the time. You're out on the floor with 10 players. There's 13 of you out there. So, it'd be interesting to see. I'm sure there's lots of changes coming that we can't even predict right now, but we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's exciting. I think some of it is, for sure, especially when we're talking about freedom of movement, the continuation things. If you're someone that's the talent can capitalize on it, right? I think that would be very helpful. There's probably a lot of Duke players in the past that are kind of licking their chops, wishing that was here now. Jamie, again, we really appreciate it. Before we do, kind of last thing here, you talked about it a little bit. Is there like I don't know if favorite is the word. Is there like a most memorable kind of game or a few games that you've been a part of that's kind of campfire, grandkids, like we start chopping it up, these come up to mind?
Well, I instantly got a cold chill when I started thinking about them. So obviously there is, the last game at Cameron, obviously, it's not only working that game, but the fact that you were assigned that game, you were trusted. Yeah. You were trusted by the assigner, Supervisor Brian Kersey, to be put in that game, knowing that the moment was not going to get the best of any of us. Like that that we were totally trusted that I can put you three out there, and I know we're going to be good, we're going to be okay, and the game's going to be taken care of. So the game was great. But getting the game is almost as good, if that makes sense, that you were trusted that much with that game. So that's one. I did 3 Final Fours, so all of those were obviously memorable. VCU, Butler, Michigan State, and then Kansas and Ohio State, I guess. All my ACC finals. And none of them Maryland beat Duke in overtime when Maryland, the only time they won it, that was my first one. So that probably stands out. And then I had a game years ago at Carolina when Chris Paul and all the guys were at Wake. They beat Carolina in triple overtime on a Saturday before Christmas, like 111 to 108, some crazy score. And that was Paul, Eric Williams,
yeah.
The great kid from Charlotte, who's at Coastal now.
Yep.
And that was Felton and May, and I mean it was just loaded with talent. And then that so that game, and there's a few others. It's funny, when I was coming up, I worked 2 CIAA finals, which is a Division II league, a very historic black conference with the HB schools, and those were big deals to me. Ben Wallace was playing for Virginia Union, so I mean, there's a lot of them, and the Duke Carolina games, obviously they kind of all stand out in their own way, but there's so many and I was blessed and fortunate to work a long time and have and referee in a lot of really, really fun games for an official. So
yeah, those early 2000s ACC was just like at a different, obviously 90s, 80s, you had some, but like it's been a while since we've had, especially in the Triangle area, like you mentioned, Wake at its peak. NC State was really good. Julius Hodge and those guys during those times, the Gary Williams in Maryland. We're going to get nostalgic here a little bit, folks. It's a different,
I want to go back and see who missed the charge call for Boeheim when he came off to his jacket.
Oh, with the Rodney Hood, the series.
I was in that game. That was CJ Fair on the
CJ Fair on
slip, and that was me, Tony Green, and Roger Ayers, and that was interesting because we came in the locker room. I happened to be the crew chief that night, John Clougherty was in charge, and Tony Green, who made the call, right or wrong, or whatever you want to argue, it doesn't matter. But he says, I got 57 text messages, right? And so I'm over here. I looked at my phone. I said, I have one. It was from John Clougherty. You're going to need to call me. But yeah, so, you know, I could probably think of 100 memorable games, but those are the ones I just threw out. But, you know, again, just to be able to survive and referee in the ACC as long as I did, and to have 25 straight tournaments is probably as important to me as any one game, because that shows that you were able to, you know, stand the test of time, you know, even though whatever people said about me, it doesn't matter, but you were able to stand that test of time and you know, have a really, really good career.
But again, Jamie, we appreciate you for coming in. Shouts to you for setting this thing up. Again, shouts to Stephanie Rich for kind of getting in here and sending us the idea. She basically made half of the outline here. So, Jamie, if you hated the questions, we're going to blame Stephanie for that one.
I hope it was helpful. I hope it was informative. I enjoyed talking to you guys. I mean, obviously, I could talk basketball all day, all night. It's kind of my job. I've been doing it for 40 years. So, yeah, it was really cool.
Well, I thought this was just unique because we all listen to a lot of college basketball, but I've never heard the perspective from an official. You know, we always get coaches and players. So this idea, when it was brought up to us, I thought it was brilliant. And shout out to my other guy, Scott Schloter, who was able to hook me up with Jamie. So appreciate you too, Scotty.
Yeah. Bridging that human, I think you called it like the humanity of it, right? Of making sure that, you know, let's not make this your, you know, church league softball where, you know, you're standing on the gate, just yelling obscenities for no reason, and recognizing that. And last point, I meant to say it earlier too. I know at Duke a few years ago, they started being very intentional of, you know, you're not going to call him a ref. You're going to call him by his name, and making sure that communication is open. So hopefully that's starting to happen elsewhere. Again, Jamie, really appreciate you. Thanks for taking about an hour out of your day here, for your time. I know you said you were retired. Didn't sound much like retirement though. A lot of work was still happening there. So again, we do appreciate that. For you all here, we appreciate y'all. So please rate, review, subscribe. You can find us anywhere you listen to podcasts. You can find us on YouTube at TheDevilsDen.com. If you hadn't had a chance yet this summer, we went live with Coach Shire. We had Jeff Goodman on and Brian Geisinger. So lots of content there for you to check out. You can find us on X/Twitter at DevilsDenPod247. You can email us at TheDevilsDenPod@gmail.com, and keep the faces strong and the verb high. Go Duke.